Do you want just a little hoops talk before Ohio State? I've got you covered because Oregon's picked 6th in the Big Ten media poll, and I think that's too low.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time for a little bonus action here on Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thanks so much for making this your first listen or your first view whenever you are listening to or watching the show, dropping at an unusual time. But somebody asked, and I thought, you know what? It actually is as good a time as any. Maybe if you're too knee-deep in Ohio State prep, thinking to yourself, I want to hear about the Ducks, but gosh, until the Ohio State game is actually here, I just need to hear about something else. I've absolutely got you covered. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'll talk a little bit about the men's side, a little bit about the women's side as well, just to kind of give you a hoops glance, because the season's a lot closer than you think. You may be wondering, Spencer, why are you doing this in the middle of the week? Well, it's the middle of the week, and frankly, I had time today and thought, you know what? There's going to be plenty of Ohio State content out there, and Oregon was picked 6th in the Big Ten media poll. They can finish a lot higher than that. I think that is an underrated look from the Big Ten media landscape. I didn't get a vote. I'm very hurt. Very hurt. I wasn't at Big Ten basketball media days, of course, but Dana Altlman was, along with 2 of the newcomers, Brandon Angel and TJ Bamba. I'll talk about them more in just a sec. But without having done a full deep dive on the rest of the Big Ten, it's a good basketball league. Purdue, of course, the national runners-up from a season ago. They lost Zach Edey, but Matt Painter is a really good coach. And Illinois with Brad Underwood, really strong program. And there are a lot of other good quality programs. We've seen Wisconsin many times over the years in the NCAA tournament. UCLA should be pretty good. I don't know what USC is going to be. They've got a new coach and whatnot, but I really like this Oregon team. The hype level for this Duck team, if N'Faly Dante had gotten another year of eligibility, which he should have, but the NCAA is the NCAA. It's their chickens with their heads cut off collectively. This would be Final Four, not or bust, but like best Final Four chance since the last time Oregon went to the Final Four. I still 100% expect Dana Altman's team to be in the NCAA tournament. I still 100% expect them to be able to make a run. Now, this is presuming, and Dana Altman even remarked or made a remark about this recently, that everyone stays healthy, which, as we all know, it's been a problem, particularly in the front court. There is a really good amount of depth up there, but if Oregon stays healthy this year, and that's an if, because it's been a dicey proposition. This team is crazy deep and crazy talented, and I haven't talked about them for quite a while on the show, but the season, like I said, is starting later this month. I hope everybody understands that, because college basketball starts later. Now, I know we're knee-deep in football. Trust me, I am as well. Tomorrow's episode with Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes, I haven't recorded it just yet as I am recording this particular show, but Oregon's first game, college basketball starts this month. Oregon's first game is November 4th, so still less than a month away. Less than a month away against UC Riverside, first year in the Big Ten. But Oregon's got a lot of newcomers. I wanted to give a brief recap as to why those newcomers are going to, I think, put Oregon in a position to be well above 6th in the Big Ten, which is an 18-team conference, and 6th in the Big Ten, might get you an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. Oregon, of course, had the thrilling season last year where Kuznard and Dante just literally were a 2-man team. They took over and almost took Oregon all the way to the Sweet 16, if not for an unfortunate ending there against Creighton. But the impactful newcomers that Oregon's going to have: Supreme Cook, Raheem Moss, Des Lindsey, TJ Bamba, Brandon Angel, Jamari Phillips. Some of those guys are going to be more impactful than others. But you blend a bunch of talented returners like Jackson Shelstad, who's preseason all Big Ten, and he absolutely should be. He was really good as a true freshman. Shelstad could have the kind of year, if he plays a full season, that makes this his last season at Oregon, because he could be an NBA kind of guy. Now, he's not the biggest dude in the world. Neither is Peyton Pritchard. And I think as a true freshman, Shelstad, who has had plenty of comparisons to Pritchard, understandably so. Pritchard was Shelstad's idol. They both went to Wesleyan. They're both really highly touted recruits. Shelstad, I think, came into college more ready to contribute than Pritchard did. And the numbers bear that out. Pritchard as a freshman was kind of a role player guy. Shelstad as a freshman was Oregon's number 3 scorer. It was Couisnard, Dante, and then it was Shelstad. Pritchard was like the number 4 or 5 or sometimes even 6 scorer on that Oregon team that went to the Final Four when he was a true freshman. He was good, don't get me wrong. His offensive game was not as advanced in his first season of college basketball as Shelstad. So I'm glad to see that Shelstad's getting that sort of recognition. He absolutely deserves it. And Oregon's going to need him to be big. You're replacing your 2 leading scorers who, as I mentioned, down the stretch, when Oregon made that phenomenal run in the Pac-12 tournament and into the NCAA tournament, beating South Carolina and almost beating Creighton, it was a 2-man team at times. It was just, all right, Couisnard's going to score 40 and Dante's going to score 20 with 15 rebounds and 5 blocks, and Oregon's going to win the game. That's kind of what it came down to most of the time. This team's going to look very different, but the depth is why I love this Oregon men's team. The depth is the biggest reason why. Injuries have been there, but this team is deep. It's deep in the front court. It's deeper on the wings. I hope Mookie Cook can stay healthy. We really haven't seen what he's capable of being in an Oregon uniform. He played for like 2 minutes last year against Washington, really. Not literally, but close to it. And then he got hurt again. So hopefully he's able to shine. But Shelstad's back. KJ Evans back. Supreme Cook is a forward from Georgetown who's going to not necessarily one-to-one fill the N'Faly Dante role, but is a big body that you brought in knowing, okay, we have a deficiency in the front court without our would-be starting center. And Nate Biddle, presuming he is healthy, is Oregon's starting center. I'd have a hard time seeing Nate Biddle come off the bench. Now, maybe he does because they want to limit his minutes. And, he's been very injury prone thus far in his career. Maybe they don't feel like he can handle that sort of workload. And Supreme Cook was a solidly productive player. He's not as big or as imposing as Dante, but definitely gives you a presence in the middle. I'm interested to see what he brings at the defensive end, but I love what KJ Evans brings to that defensive end. Raheem Moss, the transfer from Toledo, was a first-team all-conference guy. He's probably coming off the bench. Des Lindsey is Dana Altlman's annual JUCO guy. I don't know that he has a huge role. He could, because if everyone starts getting hurt again, then suddenly players will have to step up. Keyshawn Bartholomew is back off the bench. Those 3 guys you should expect to see coming off the bench and running the second unit. Raheem Moss, Des Lindsey, Keyshawn Bartholomew. Bartholomew is not a newcomer, but a returner and an important one to be sure. I don't know about Jamari Phillips. They flipped him from Arizona. He's a shooting guard, true freshman. I don't know. I think between him and Des Lindsey, one of those guys maybe plays a little throughout the year and maybe emerges more as time goes on. I don't think any one of those guys are starters, but 2 guys who definitely will be are the guys that were with Dana Altlman at Big Ten Basketball Media Days. TJ Bamba, one-time Washington State Cougar, one-time Villanova Wildcat, and Brandon Angel, who had a 4-year career at Stanford. These guys are playing their final season of college basketball. If you're looking for players that justify a mindset of being all in for this Oregon team, TJ Bamba and Brandon Angel are those guys. When asked at Big Ten Media Days, hey, why'd you come to Oregon? They both went to the same thing. Angel specifically, because he'd been on Stanford teams where he was productive, and he's a very versatile guy. He can play down low. He can slash. He can rebound a little bit. He can shoot the 3. He was asked, well, why'd you want to go to Oregon? He said, I need to win. Not I want to win. He said, I need to win. Because he's been playing under Jared Hass at Stanford for a program that just hasn't been winning, but he's been a good player. And TJ Bamba went to Villanova thinking that was going to be a contender, and they had a bust of a season. So Bamba's familiar with Dana Altlman. I mean, Dana's familiar with both of these guys. And, when asked about him, Dana said that, well, they've killed us in the past. So we know how good these guys are. We know how good they can really be. But I think for this Oregon team, your starting lineup, most likely, just a guess. Shelstad's obviously going to start at point guard. TJ Bamba will start. Brandon Angel will start. I think KJ Evans starts. And most likely, you have Nate Biddle at the starting center position. That's a 5 that can make noise in March. You give me that team to build chemistry early in the season, and you bring a Supreme Cook off the bench, a Raheem Moss off the bench, you bring Bam Tracy, who was a starter last year, off the bench, who can shoot the 3 and score inside a little bit. Keyshawn Bartholomew, instant offense, the ideal backup point guard in college basketball, just comes in and scores the ball and can shoot the 3 really well. I love the depth. I love the versatility. The size is there. I think the defense is going to be there. I'm bullish. absolutely bullish on this men's basketball team. I think I'm slightly higher on the prospects of Oregon football to push for a national championship, but the likelihood that the men's team can make that magical run in March this year with this roster at a glance on paper, every bit as likely, save for like maybe take 10% off because Dante's not there, and that's a question mark, particularly on the defensive end and rebounding. This team can make noise. This team can make noise. I saw they were picked to finish 6th. And one of you had asked me, hey, can you take a look at basketball? I was like, yeah. And then I saw that, and I'm like, 6th? 6th? I don't know about 6th. I think they could finish higher than that. So that's on the men's side. What about the women's side? They're looking for a bounce back year. They just might have the players to do it. That is coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Do you think Oregon is being grossly undervalued at plus 3.5 at home against Ohio State? I kind of do. I haven't made my prediction yet here on the show. I'm just telling you. I think I'd go Oregon plus 3.5. Now, I'm also 0-5 against the spread in my score prediction picks this season for Oregon football, so take that for what it's worth. So if you want to go on the other side, take Ohio State minus 3.5, hedge your happiness, as they say, you can do that. All at America's #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel.com. So I did want to wrap up a shorter show than normal because, as you saw in the title of this episode, it's a bonus episode, just little hoops at a glance coming into this season. If you want more hoops questions answered on the show, I'm always here for it. Always here for it. I am as big a college basketball fan as much as I am a college football fan. I follow both Duck teams very closely. And for those of you that are fans of the women's side and know what the program once was under Kelly Graves, who's back as the head coach, and what it was a season ago, pretty dramatic drop-off. I mean, from literally the top of the sport, I will stand by and I will take to my grave that Sabrina team that had the COVID tournament, that had the tournament canceled because of COVID. That team was winning a national championship. That is, I don't even have any doubts about that. Like, that just is automatic in my mind. Like, that team was winning it all. And it's one of the biggest bummers in the history of Oregon sports' quest to claim a national championship in some of the more major sports. Of course, there are national championships in other sports. But for Kelly Graves, it is a complete, not entirely, but it is a pretty darn complete teardown from a season ago. Last season, let's call a spade a spade. It was a mess. They weren't just losing. They were getting run off the court. They lost to Utah Tech on the road. That's a team in Southern Utah's rival, actually, down in St. George. And it's pretty solid, low to mid-major program. Should not ever beat Oregon. At home, on the road, should not happen, but Utah Tech won. And then it just kind of spiraled, got out of control. A lot of players left in the offseason, but they've brought in 7 transfers. Now, if I were to say the football team brought in 7 transfers, you'd say, that's it? Only 7 transfers? But in basketball, that's a lot of guys. And the men have brought in a bunch of newcomers, as I mentioned. There was another guy they brought in from Europe. I don't know if he's going to be a big depth piece or a big player for the Oregon basketball team, but he would also make 7 new additions. Jamari Phillips, a freshman, but the other guys all transfers in some respect for Dana Altlman. But Kelly Graves has brought in 7 transfers as well. 2 that are of especially worthy note. So Peyton Scott transferred from Miami, Ohio. She is, let's just say, well entrenched in the Red Hawks record books over there in women's basketball. She was a 4-year player over there. And then Deja Kelly comes over from North Carolina. This was probably the biggest get of the offseason for Kelly Graves and company to pick up Kelly. That's a player who also 4-year player at a Power 4 program, Miami, Ohio, not a Power 4, but a mid-major. And Deja Kelly, really proven player in college basketball. And I don't have as high of expectations for the women's team as I do for the men's team, because I think what you should be looking at, if you're a fan of Oregon women's basketball at all, if you want to see the women's program succeed, as I do, this just needs to be a season of get something back. Like, take a step back towards what Oregon was prior to the decline in the last couple of seasons. If you can accomplish that, I'll feel good. Push for an at-large berth in the NCAA tournament. Win some notable games. Have a winning record, first of all. That'd be the first step. They only won a handful of conference games last year. I think it was only 2 or 3. It was a really, really bad season. But if they can take a step towards kind of recovering their brand and recovering their reputation, I think that'll bode well as they continue to recruit. And I think the fact that, before they've had the chance to do that, they pick up a player like Deja Kelly or Peyton Scott in the transfer portal, it says good things about how Kelly Graves is viewed in the women's basketball space. He's a very well-respected guy, and he is a really, really good coach who had a really, really bad season last year. It was not good. So if he can recover that, I think that will aid in the recruiting process. And, probably the most important returner, probably the most productive returner is Philly Che, who's been with the program for the last couple of years, came in incredibly raw. I mean, incredibly raw, but is a big body down low. And she became a double-double machine. Like, there were not a lot of bright spots for Oregon women's basketball last year. Philly Che was the bright spot. So you have 2 dynamic, productive, experienced guards with an evolving big who had the best season of her career last year. That's foundation. The question is, how does everybody else fit in? How do the new transfers get incorporated? And can they get back to what they have been and what we know they're capable of being? So if you got more hoops questions, by all means, let me know as the season gets closer. Of course, games will get mentioned more frequently on the show as they actually arrive. But one of you asked specifically, and I didn't just do the show because one of you asked, but maybe I kind of did. You'll never know. I'm kidding. I had thought about doing it and such. So that is your break. Ohio State content will resume tomorrow on the show, dropping at a normal time. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.